Since starting the season 1-6, the Detroit Lions have won 5 out of their last 6 games, including a 34-23 victory over their division rivals, the Minnesota Vikings. I believe that the Lions right now are one of the best teams in the NFL. You may say, "Oh, JT, you're crazy if you think the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL right now, JT. They're 6-7. You're not always what your record says you are. The Lions are 6-7, but have you seen this team play over the last couple of weeks? Does this look like a team that's 6-7? No. This is a team that looks like they should be 8-4 right now. The Detroit Lions have went toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the NFL this season. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills recently, not too long ago on Thanksgiving. They have wins over the Vikings, the Giants, two teams who right now are in the thick of the playoff race right now, including the Minnesota Vikings, who are trying to maybe find a way to get that number 1 seed from Philadelphia if they end up slowing down anytime soon. But when you look at the Detroit Lions right now, this team is playing their best football at the right time. I tell everybody this every single year, and you guys know the rant I'm about to go on. The real NFL season begins after Thanksgiving, because after Thanksgiving is when you start to see teams separate themselves. Teams who started off hot early in the season, like the New York Giants, have now started to cool off. And teams who started off slow, such as the Detroit Lions, have now started to heat up. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. When you look at the teams who have made quote-unquote Cinderella runs in the playoffs, it's been teams like the Detroit Lions who have caught fire at this point of the season. If the Detroit Lions make it into the playoffs as a 7 seed, whoever they play, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I was listening to Colin Cowherd's podcast that he has on the Volume, and he made a really good point when he was talking about how 7 seed teams most of the times are teams that are pretty limited. Most of the times, they don't have a great offense. They're led by great defense. And they just try not to turn the football over all that much. The Detroit Lions are the opposite from that. Think of the Pittsburgh Steelers from last season. They got into the playoffs as the 7th seed. What were they? They were really limited. They didn't have a good offense. Their defense was really good. That was all. The Lions, on the other hand, yeah, their defense isn't great, but their offense can go toe-to-toe with anybody. And that's what makes the Detroit Lions such a formidable threat right now at this point of the season, and why you don't want to play this team in the playoffs if they get the 7th seed. I'd rather play a team in the playoffs that has a great defense and no offense versus a team that has an elite offense and a not so great defense. Because if you have an elite offense, you can score and go toe to toe even if your defense is allowing a touchdown on every single drive. All you have to do is hope and pray that you can get the ball last and win the game that way. So for the Detroit Lions, I'm really excited about what this team can do moving forward. I believe this team is going to get into the playoffs. I think they're going to steal the 7th seed from either the Giants or Seattle, whoever's able to hold on and get a hold of it. Right now, when you look at the current NFC playoff picture, the last remaining seeds are currently occupied by the Commanders and the New York Giants, who both are 7-5-1. The Seattle Seahawks are on the outside looking in at 7-6. They play the San Francisco 49ers this Thursday. The Detroit Lions are right behind them. And when you look at the Lions' schedule, the close this season, really favorable. Yeah, you could go on the road to play the New York Jets, but guess what? They have a great defense, but their offense isn't that good. If you can slow down the run game and force them to have to throw the ball with Mike White, you like your chances in that game. You go on the road to play Carolina, then you have the Bears and the Packers, which that Packers game could be really big because that could be the game that decides who ends up getting that 7 seed in the NFC. You can't count out the Packers. They also are starting to click on offense with their young wide receivers starting to come on, so you can't overlook them. This Detroit Lions team, they're dangerous. And if you're a team that is trying to get into the playoffs, such as the New York Jets, the Carolina Panthers, or the Green Bay Packers, you probably should be a little worried. Because if you're trying to get into the playoffs and you need a win against the Detroit Lions, it's going to be really tough to get one at this point in the season because this team is playing some really good football. On defense, their defensive line, I've been pretty impressed with. Aiden Hutchinson is leading the team in sacks. He's had a pretty good rookie season. He's performed up to the level of expectations that you expect him to play when you draft somebody as high as what Detroit did. Not to mention Jeff Okudah. Got to give him a huge round of applause. I thought it was over for Jeff Okudah. I thought he was done. I thought he was a bust. I figured Detroit, the only way they could save his career is by possibly moving him to safety. He's came back this season, and he's played pretty well when he's been on the field for the Detroit Lions. You also have a couple of other players who are now starting to come on the offensive line. You have one of the best in the league. This is a Detroit Lions team. I'm trying to tell you guys, if you're a fan of the Jets, the Panthers, or the Packers, you're trying to make a late season playoff push, you don't want to play the Lions, bruh. This team is playing some really good football. Dan Campbell is coaching out of his mind. This offense has been good, not just because of the talent they have, but because of the coaching. I didn't know that Dan Campbell was this good of an offensive genius. And he was getting praised by Sean Payton when he went on a episode of The Herd a couple of weeks ago. And he was talking about how he expects Detroit to start picking things up sooner rather than later. He gave a lot of praise to Dan Campbell and how well he understands X's and O's on the offensive side of the ball. And I didn't even know that Dan Campbell was considered an offensive-minded coach. Well, it kind of makes sense now because this Detroit Lions offense is rolling. This team is dangerous. This is one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL. As a matter of fact, bump it. This is the most dangerous team in the NFL. You want to know why the Lions are the most dangerous team in the NFL right now? They're playing loose. They're playing motivated football. Not only are they playing motivated football, but they're playing highly effective football on both sides of the football. Their defense isn't great. Yes, they're 31st in yards per game allowed, but I don't really care about that because this defense has improved. This is a better defense at this point of the season compared to what it was at the start of the season. Did you see the Detroit Lions defense for the first, 8 weeks, 9 weeks of this year? It was awful. You couldn't trust them to stop a nosebleed. But with this defense, over the last couple of weeks, they've gotten a little bit better. And come playoff time, this defense isn't going to get a whole lot better. But I do think if the Lions get into the playoffs, I think their defense is probably good enough to get you a stop or two late in games. Overall, this is a team that's going to win based off offense. As long as they can score 27 a game and they can hold opposing offenses to 24 points, I think the Lions have a really good shot at being able to not only win out, but to make maybe a little bit of a playoff run as well.